Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 7/27/2021 City Council Budget Meeting. Notice is hereby given of a special meeting of the City Council of City of San Angelo to be held July 27th, 2021 at 9 a.m. at City Hall East Mezzanine, 72 West College Avenue, San Angelo, Texas, for the purpose of considering the following agenda items. Number one, obviously calling the meeting to order, which we have done at 9:01 a.m. We will open up for public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. Item 3 on the agenda is the workshop itinerary, with A, discussion of matters regarding the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget preparation, including but not limited to 1, Public Works Operating Funds revenue and expenditures, which Tina will present, and then 2, opportunities for additional revenues for capital projects, Shane Kelton, and then 3, other items needing council attention. So we will start with item A1, Public Works Operating Funds revenue and expenditures. Tina, you're on. Well, Tina's not here.
She's not here.
Good morning, Mayor,
Good
City
morning.
Council. Kimberly Hawley, Budget Manager. Tina's unable to be with us today, so I will be presenting in her absence. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me.
I've got one to start with. When I look at the June 30th, 2021, and I look at the property tax dollars as of July 30th, it shows that we're at 98%, but we're $814,350 under the budgeted number. Can you explain the $814,350? Because it looks like we're going to have a shortfall on property taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
And how is that?
So the majority of our property tax comes in early in the calendar year, January, February. However, we do have some lingering payments that come in throughout the year. So historically, we do receive 100% of that budget.
So we're not nervous of not getting the $814,350?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay, proceed.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so at the last workshop, we discussed the other enterprise funds, and today we're going to discuss the water fund, water reclamation, solid waste, and stormwater. And then again, at the next meeting on August 12th, we will be discussing general fund, including property tax and sales tax projections. Starting off with the water fund, you'll see a slight increase in water sales. There is not a projected increase to the water rates. However, the department is projecting a slight increase in consumption.
In looking at, again, the June 30th, 2021 numbers on the water fund, it looks like we're going to miss the plan. Does that read what everybody, is everyone reading that like I'm reading it?
Yes, we're currently at 79% through our water sales budget, at 75% through the year, with most of our heaviest consumption months to come. So I wouldn't project a shortfall.
Okay.
All right, and then we have our other line, and that includes interest income, leases, and auction proceeds, and sale of material. And just as
transfers in from Development Corporation is the larger. As well as transfers in is in the other line, and that is the largest change in the increase in that is how we are allocating the transfer from Development Corporation to pay for the West Texas Water Partnership annual payment. That was historically done in our capital account. Now that their contract has been executed, we're putting that in the operating fund.
All right, so we're not increasing any of the water rates. So where are we getting the $1,142,247 in additional sales?
Correct. So the last increase occurred in 2020, January 1. We are seeing an increased sales with the development and those type of aspects. In 2020 or 2019, Our deliveries were roughly 12.8 or 12.5 million gallons. In 2020, we saw that average go up to 13.3. So ultimately, we're sending more water out through our distribution system consistently on a daily basis.
So with the 13 million plus gallons per day, talk to me about our water supplies.
We're still holding steady with water supplies. I reran those numbers because we do receive updates for Lake Ivy in January. And so as of January 1, we were at 59 months of water supply. That's still with only allocating 1.5 million gallons from the Hickory. So we do know that we're moving forward with that expansion, and we can look at reallocating how much we bring in from the Hickory on a daily basis or into that calculation. But ultimately, that only calculates 1.5 million gallons daily from that source.
What's our capacity in terms of more water if we need it from Hickory Aquifer?
Still at 8 million gallons currently. The expansion will go up to 12. So we can look at bumping that daily allocation up, and it would increase those months of water supply. TCEQ has approved those treatment plant design for that expansion, and now that's being passed to Texas Water Development Board for their review. Once it receives that next regulatory review, then we can proceed with bidding that project out.
What do you think the timeline on that is?
I would hope in 2 months or so with Texas Water Development Board.
So would you perceive in 2021, 2022 budget that we would be within that year timeframe that we would start the production or the work on the new water treatment?
Yes, I would consider construction to begin during that 2022 range. But we wouldn't up the allocation until that project was completely done. So probably in the late 2023 or early 2024.
So at this point, we don't see any negative impact on water supply relative to water use.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving over to expenditures, we have a slight increase in personnel due to some staff turnover and
And explain that.
there was a change in distribution of the executive director position. Historically, that was charged all to the general fund. We felt it was more appropriate to charge that out amongst the divisions that they supervise.
And Allison, how do you feel about that? No
That's okay.
comment? Okay, keep on going.
All right, we have a decrease in O&M that is related to our refinancing of the Hickory, and we also had the sale of the Ford Ranch, therefore our debt payment decreased. And then we have
And so at this point, we have paid off the debt borrowed to buy the Ford Ranch.
we would project that to be complete by fiscal year end.
So we're.
There's still a council action to be taken to close out that bond, and that's being, or Tina and Vince are working on that currently.
So we would see that sometime soon. Okay.
All right. And then there also is the increase that Allison mentioned for the West Texas Water Partnership. All right. Do you have any other questions on the water fund?
Any questions from council members? Proceed.
Okay, transitioning to water reclamation, we are not projecting an increase for charges of service there. Rates again have remained the same, and we're not seeing the consumption increase in water reclamation that we're seeing in water. So that is budgeted flat with 2021's budget.
Sales and wastewater are different in terms of the volumetric charge. Residential customers receive the first 4,000 gallons without a volumetric charge. And also the sewer fee is also based off the winter quarter average. So while we see those increases in the consumption side of water, because of the fee structure in the wastewater side, we're seeing that those revenues are staying stable.
You know what I didn't ask on the previous slide, I'm going to ask now, is we created the program for low-income families, low-income households on the water issue. How has that worked out?
So we have authorized $50,000 annually to go towards that program. On a typical year, or at least the 1 year of pre-COVID that we had, those funds were spent out or allocated within the first 2.5 to 3 months of the year. So that program starts in January. Concho Valley Community Action Agency administers it, and those funds go quite rapidly. During the coronavirus relief funds, we allocated an additional $100,000 to that program, and they are, I believe those started in late 2020, and they are basically, I think there's last time I checked, around $7,000 or $8,000 left from that. So in 2020, ultimately $150,000 went to that program. But I can tell you it is highly used, and the funds do go quickly. And
How are we budgeting those funds this year for this budget?
we are budgeting the $50,000 contractual, or the allocated price that we've set for that program.
But knowing that that's going to go fast, do we not need to budget more dollars, knowing historically, at least 1 year, that it's going to be necessary, or what?
In talking with Concho Valley Community Action Agency, there are some grants that they are looking to apply for. So not only, so what I can speak to are the city funds that are being spent to the program, but they are using grants and other resources that they receive funds from that are also paying down people's water bills. So that might be a discussion we need to have with them on what relief efforts they may be able to apply for, or we may be able to match for, but right now we're just meeting the contractual or the fund, the program design.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda.
Yes, Tommy?
Allison, just for the benefit that those folks who may be watching or listening, or for those that may watch, remind us what 3 months specifically are the months that are looked at for setting sewer rate?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Is it December, January, February, or is
I
it?
believe it's November, December, and January.
Okay, thank you.
The other line in water reclamation includes farm lease revenue, connections, paving cuts, auction proceeds, sale of property, and interest income.
Could you make sure you're speaking into the microphone, because I
Yes,
can't
ma'am.
hear?
All right, and then, of course, interest income is again projected at a decrease of $140,000. Moving to expenditures, there again is an increase in personnel that is related to the executive director position, and some overtime increases anticipated in the coming year. There is a decrease in O&M that is related to a refinancing of the debt payments for the 2011A and the 2017 refunding. And then capital is an offset in order to maintain the cash flowing street projects. Do you have any questions on
Further
reclamation?
questions or comments? Keep going.
Moving over,
Well, sorry, before we move on to the other funds, can you go back to the water fund? Sorry, let me get my microphone. I am requesting a change in the personnel and allocation that you see split in the water fund. After February's events, we are trying to build a cross-control connection program. And so I have put in a request for 5 additional personnel to administer and to implement that program like we need to be in TCEQ and state compliance. And so that has a personnel change of $310,000. I would propose to allocate or move money from the capital line that has a $3.8 million increase and move that into personnel. And so that is a request for 5 additional people
It
to
would
administer.
seem to me going from 0 to 5 would be pretty aggressive, and we've already trained 2 people, right?
Well, one of those is our Assistant Director of Water Utilities, and so he had the education in the background and took a class so that he could get licensed, but he cannot go on a day-to-day basis to go do those inspections. But he does have the, I guess, the background or the experience to make sure that we're administering the program properly. He knows the rules and the background behind it, so it's more for an educational component. We do have one person currently that is able to go do inspections. But due to the size of the city, you start looking at ASU, Shannon facilities, all the big commercialized industries, one person, I mean, we will not even put a dent in those inspections. And so we have looked at other cities and compared how many personnel they have. And we feel that that's in line with a program or cities our size to be able to have 5 people that could go and do those inspections on a routine basis.
And what else would they do? Because again, I think 5 people's too aggressive. Going from 0 to 5, I can't support that. So the issue is how do we relook at the request for personnel and look at a broader responsibility for some of those folks? Because I can't imagine 5 people, 20, however many hours a day, 7 days a week, doing that project. It's just not realistic.
I can tell you, with 5 people, we would still stay very busy doing those inspections on a daily basis. I don't know if are you saying additional work for those people or?
I'm saying going from 0 to 5 is way too aggressive. I can understand wanting to add some personnel. 5 seems like a pretty strong number. And I'm very concerned that we would reduce capital expenditures because we know, number one, there's a huge challenge as it relates to capital needs for water lines, replacement of water lines, et cetera. So I have a real problem taking money out of the capital line to fund personnel.
I understand that. The other, I guess, I would like to say that we should have been adding these personnel throughout the years as the city has grown, as the requirements of what we're required to look at facilities and how often we're supposed to go to them has changed. So I realize 0 to 5 is a huge jump, but if we had been adding these personnel back then, I could see the increase, but the workload is such to develop or to administer a program properly to make sure that we are in compliance with state regulations. It will take every bit of those 5 people.
Yeah, I don't support it, and I don't support reducing capital by that amount of money. Capital is a huge, big issue for us. The number of times that we have to go to a water boil because of broken water lines, et cetera, I just can't reduce capital dollars. We got to take care of the broken water lines and sewer lines and things that impact the entire city.
Mayor, I'm going to go the
Yes.
other way. I think the 5 are needed. I think as we continue to grow as a community, I think we're going to have 5, and we're going to have more. So I do support adding the 5 people at this point in time, since we don't have any. Well, we've got 1 now, but I'll have to go the other way.
Well, I stay strong. We need money in the capital budget, and I cannot reduce capital dollars for personnel dollars.
Well, then we need to find the money somewhere else, in my opinion. Allison, does TCEQ mandate X number of folks?
No, they do not mandate a personnel count. What they mandate is when those inspections are to be performed.
So we're talking about 88 facilities that need to be inspected.
No, you're talking citywide. Every commercial business, every residential home being constructed has to have a CSI inspection. This is citywide. Every commercial facility, every residential facility has to have these inspections.
Did you have a comment?
I had a question. Allison, so what had we been doing all these other years?
So we've been doing these inspections as I guess, with the plumbing inspectors, but they have not been done to a level where we need to. Right now, if you pull a plumbing permit, the inspections are being performed, but to go back and routine visit these facilities and those type of things, those have not been done.
So all these years, we've ended up with one problem this past year.
Allison, Mayor, could I ask a question? What I'm hearing is this will function more like the fire marshal's office functions, where there's an initial construction type inspection where certain standards have to be met, and then periodically, certain classes of facilities will have inspections to ensure that they maintain compliance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And your point is what?
That
Because
it's-
I'm just
it's-
talking about historically, okay? So historically, we've had the problem we had in February how many times?
It is that one event, but being the, I guess, in the director role, providing safe water to our citizens, I believe that we should take every precaution that we can to ensure or to prevent February's event from ever happening again. And so we are being mandated to create a cross-connection control program as a result of February's event. So TCEQ is looking for the implementation and the basically for the city to put this program in place, and it will take personnel to do that.
Lucy, go ahead.
Allison, does it have to be 5? Could we start off with a lower number and add on as we go?
I would not turn down any amount of people that we could dedicate to this program, but I will say that we've looked at basically how big of an infrastructure base the city of San Angelo has, and we do think it would take every bit of 5 people to get that program administered properly.
Harry, go ahead.
To follow up what Lucy was saying, and I think Allison just answered that question, but we have to make sure that we are ensuring to the citizens that this water is protected. So, you know, if the number has to be 5 because of TCEQ regulations or whatever that number is, I'm going to support that. I want to make sure that we don't have a reissue of the February situation. We need to ensure to the citizens that we're doing everything we can to protect that water system.
I don't disagree, and I think we also need to ensure the citizens that we don't have how many more boil water notices because we have a broken water line, and so here we go, shutting down the entire city or half of the city or portions of the city because of broken water lines. So it's not just about the safety relative to the incident that happened in the month of February. That was one time in how many decades? Certainly very dramatic and certainly very concerning. On the other hand, to take money out of capital is something I can't support because I cannot support reducing capital expenditures when in fact we have so many water line breaks because we're still got cast iron lines in the ground. So it's, you know, and again, I go from 0 to 5 is a lot. If we want to go from 0 to 3, and TCQ is not demanding 5 people. They're asking us to create a program. They're not demanding the city of San Angelo finance 5 new people. They're asking us to have a program.
Mayor, if I may. So if we're looking at even a smaller number, I know that we have budgets, of course, we have these discussions every year, you know, so we look at a number, and you're talking, Allison, as far as we should have been growing this on an annual basis, or at least to get to a number that we'd be comfortable with. So if we're looking at a smaller number, and you said a while ago you'd be willing to accept anything at this point, as long as in the future we had some discussions, Mayor, based on the need. Once we have 3 people or 4 people out there, however many people the city council can support, and when they're out there inspecting and doing what they do, we'll have a better feel for what volume they can actually handle. So even if we start off with a smaller number, as the mayor mentioned a while ago, if they do add, let's say, three additional CSIs, we can study that to see how much of an impact that'll have this year. And then next year, we can discuss a little bit further as far as the needs for more CSIs. If that's okay with everyone. But again, I do know that we do need the CSIs. I know from the incident that we just had that if we were to have another incident, I know TCEQ probably wouldn't take it as easy on us as they did this last time.
Well, I don't think they took it so easy on us, so let's be careful with the adjectives.
Well, no, I agree with that, Mayor, but the ramifications in the future, Lord forbid this ever happen again, then that's my biggest
Agreed.
concern.
I don't
So,
disagree. I'm just saying, first time in how many decades?
Sure.
One time, one incident. We've investigated all of those 83, 85, 88 industrial facilities and made them compliant. Is that right?
Yes, we're still working on the follow-up inspections of those 80-plus facilities.
And how do we?
So,
how do
yes,
we
Tommy.
How do we explain to the citizens, when we don't have enough people out there doing the inspections, that we either didn't get to it or we missed one, and we have another incident that may not be as severe? How do we explain that?
Well, with 5, you still might have that incident. So you can't say that by having 5, you prevent that. But I think the key issue here is I don't think we can explain to the citizens again about another water boil notice 2 or 3 times a year because we can't get the cast iron pipes out of the ground. And Tom, you had your hand up.
Allison, how much for each one? What's your
For
funding?
each inspector,
Yeah. 60? By the time you figure benefits and everything?
by the time you're looking at benefits, the average salary is 62. It's a $43,000 base salary with $19,000 of benefits.
Gotcha. And so what we're talking about, and I see the capital, I see the requirements, I know that TCEQ, and I have talked with TCEQ friends that I have that work there, and they're bringing in that same thing as you've got a lot of ground to cover. I see that. And we've had this discussion. I remember when we talked about 7. But on that line, you know, how many inspections, if we've got 5 people and they're doing, you say 5 inspections a day?
No, currently it takes 2 to 3 max, because then you go through an entire facility, the travel time to get there, and you can't just, with these inspections, you have to do the full facility. You cannot just look at one particular backflow prevention device and walk out the door. And then you have to follow it up with the TCEQ required form that has to be, sent to the customer. So then there's the paperwork side of thing,
Right.
or of the operation, but 2 to 3 inspections max. But if you're looking at a facility like Shannon Hospital, it could take you a month or more to do that facility.
So how many inspections are you anticipating? I mean, I know this is a number we're trying to pull out of here, but is this thousands, tens of thousands? I'm trying to work back. I see the mayor's point. When you suddenly throw 5 people out there, we're researching every commercial business, existing and under construction, plus every house, new construction, correct? How about
Which the plumbers, stop with that one second, Tom. So all of a sudden, we're not having the plumbing inspections for new residents continue with that responsibility?
So currently, the plumbing inspectors will continue to do it on the new residential and new commercial facilities.
Yeah.
But when they are pulling permits for remodels or any of those, they are only looking at the remodeled bathroom or mop sink, whatever the case may be, whereas an inspection is needed for the full facility. And so that is where our inspectors would have to come back in and to go back to these facilities on an annual basis, not just plumbing permit pulling necessarily.
Continue, Tom, sorry.
So do we charge a fee for this?
We have not discussed charging a fee for their inspections, no.
Okay, so, and I think that's something that needs to come out to help subsidize this as we look forward. I mean, if I'm building a house, I realize there's a fee or something goes on there that's associated with that. I don't think it's fair for the population to bear the entire burden of a curriculum or a group of people coming there. So, yeah, I think this one deserves further discussion and maybe some numbers down there, what we're looking at. I have this fear of 5 people running around just trying to look for something to
Me too.
inspect.
Heavy-handed
But
is what you think.
from what you're saying, that's not the case, all right? And so I'm going a little faith in there, but, I'm kind of with Daniel. Maybe we shoot it at the 3 mark and say, all right, let's work on the 3, and then set your benchmarks in there, and you tell us where we're sitting short, and have your goal as 5, but I just.
Could we ask her to come back throughout the year? If you see, if we go with something less than 5, if you see that your X number are just literally, no pun intended here, underwater, with their inspections, would you come back to us during that point in time and then tell us, hey, I need another inspector, I need 2 more inspectors?
No, I can definitely do a progress update as we get people hired. The other part of, as we get people hired, there is a training component. So we most likely will not hire somebody who's from day one qualified to be a CSI. There is amount of field experience. If you have a high school education, then it's this much field experience plus a class plus a test. If you have college credit, so it gets to take off the years of field experience. So there is a tiered requirement before you can even take that test to become a CSI. So I guess what I'm trying to get at with that is if I was authorized the 3 additional personnel today, it could still be next year before I could probably have some sort of progress update, just because of the licensing requirements and testing requirements.
When we went through this situation in February, so we had CSIs from McAllen come and work from Lubbock.
McAllen, Lubbock, we had 1 from Abilene and 1 from Brownwood.
Yes, would you like to speak to Larry?
We're behind the power curve, right? And what I'm wondering about is if we allocate 5 for this now and you get past this enormous effort we have right now, do you anticipate that that could be decreased?
You know, bureaucracies, we never decrease. Great idea, but it never happens.
I would just say with the rate of commercial and residential housing market that we're seeing now, there would be more facilities to inspect at some, once we get past the curve of just getting the existing facilities inspected, that existing facility count keeps growing, so therefore, no, I would not see a reduction.
So as a property owner, are you going to come into my home and inspect me?
If you pull a permit to do some sort of modification to your home, yes.
But if
see
I
it.
don't pull anything to do anything,
And
then
that's-
nothing happens.
And that's one of the reasons why the routine inspections is so important, is because those people that aren't pulling a permit, whether it's in their home or it's in their commercial business, and they created some cross-connection that they didn't know at that time was an issue, those routine inspections are those that would catch those type of incidences and correct those matters.
I just want to make sure we're real clear on this. So if I don't pull a new permit for a remodel or anything else, you are not coming into my house, is that correct?
Not unless there is a reason or a suspicion to see that.
So we've got remodels, we've got new construction, we have the existing 88 facilities on commercial or,
The 88 are only what's in Pauline. That is not a.
okay, how many do we have? How many will you foresee on an annual basis of commercial through the years? Because even if we're looking at an annual basis and you say Shannon Hospital might take a month, you come in January 1, you finish up February 1, and you start that all over the next year, January 1, through the years. And, it's unfortunate that we have had this incident to have this discussion, but I'm in the same boat as the mayor right now. 5 to start off, just to start creeping around and trying to find issues is concerning to me. We have our plumbing inspectors that deal with the permit sides of remodels, construction, new builds. If you have a commercial building go up, let's just say January 1, they finish it. The next January 1, they're coming around and inspecting something that's still probably under a warranty, probably not faulty, and in my opinion could be a waste of time. Because it's not going to take, I'm not going to put a year to it, but it's going to take years for valves to start having mishaps. And to say that we have to go in and inspect every year on that facility is a little bit of an overstep, in my opinion. We have 2 plumbing inspectors now, so that'll catch remodels and new builds. And then on the recurring side, I don't know how many we
Plumbing
need.
inspectors are only doing new construction when it comes to these inspections, not the remodels. That's where we need our personnel to do those type of things.
What's the difference between needing one to do a remodel and one for a new build?
as far as
Nothing.
TCEQ?
Are you
Or
replumbing a house? Are you replumbing?
Well, because
a
the plumbing
building?
inspector is only going to look at that, by plumbing code, they are only looking at the one aspect being for the pull of that permit. And so it is the water utility side that triggers the facility-wide inspection.
So
But
if you
go ahead.
If you go and do a bathroom remodel and you're just moving around, because it's the water lines that you're concerned about. If you're moving around water lines in that one central location, your chance of probably having something misconnected that the plumbing inspector's not gonna catch is probably 0.001%.
I think that's true. She's just pointing out that they're gonna look at that one component. We don't have the staff
Right.
to go inspect the whole facility. So
But
they're
it's
looking
not
at
gonna
that-
be deemed necessary to go and all the way to the meter and check
They're
that
not
just
checking all
because.
that. They're looking at one thing. So if the facility needs a complete inspection, then you need. more
TCEQ
people.
regulations state if there is modification to the plumbing system, an entire inspection has to be done. So I understand what you're saying, that most likely they're not going to get a cross-connection made, but that is what the rules state to do.
Wow.
Well, I can't support 5 if the council is looking at 3 as a beginning to see if this is an overkill. I guess we can overkill. But again, water boils on an annual basis are out of control. And so when we reduce capital expenditures, there's a real issue for me on what is the bigger problem, and that is old water lines that collapse and/or break and/or whatever they do.
I do want to point out that there still will be a net increase in the capital line compared to last year's budget. If we were to allocate all 5 of the positions, we would have a net increase to capital of $3.5 million.
I don't support 5, won't support 5. Continue.
All right. Do y'all want to set a number for Allison to bring back in the draft budget for adoption?
I'm saying 3 people, Lane's saying 3, Lucy's saying 3, who else says 3?
Well, I'll go there. Can you also throw a projection in there what fees they might generate? I mean, you might be able to do that with your 3, and they might subsidize 2 of their own, all right? And just look
I
at
just
that.
keep, we can't keep throwing fees out at people. I mean,
That's what I was gonna say
a
is,
fee into.
we don't want to reduce the capital because we've raised the price of water. And that's the one thing that if we want to, I mean, these people are paying for water. And now if we have to start taking money out of there to pay for, new employees, that's too many right now. I just think we need to.
I guess the fee structure, at least that first comes to my mind, is one that you would do when you pull the plumbing permit or you pull a new construction build. It would be added to those, so for those services, that would be what subsidized, not just to the municipal statement for water sewer bill, to the everyday customer.
Again, I'm just taking a look at the housing industry as we speak. And people, right now, people would love to buy a house, but they're being able to afford a lot lesser of a house than they used to because the price of lumber, copper, everything else, commodities have gone up. And so then you start throwing in more fees. Every $1,000 that you add to the cost of a house eliminates, I forget how many, 10,000 potential customers. You can't, fees add costs to a home. That's what they do.
Mayor, may I speak? Allison, you're not proposing today to add a fee structure for this, is that correct?
No, was not.
So the fee, this discussion about fees, we can jump into that, but she's not proposing that today. No specific fees for this process. She's just trying to gain
My
capacity for
proposal was to do
compliance.
it with the existing
Okay.
revenues and expenditures.
I cannot support more than 3, and as horrible as February was, and it's once in how many decades? And if we do thorough inspections of these facilities, I can't imagine that we need to finance 5 right now. I just can't. It's not an acceptable number for me.
Well, we can work with 3 and then progress or bring back progress reports on workload and facilities able to be visited and those type of things.
Okay?
Moving to.
Let's talk about that capital a minute, go back.
To the water fund?
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about what's in that capital budget for 21, 2022.
The majority of it is going to be in our improvements lines, such as replacing water mains. There is 120, I'm sorry.
So we also do new fire hydrants, meter replacements, in-house water main when we are replacing small segments. We purchase pipe out of those capital accounts, but the big portion of that is dedicated to those capital projects that we're keeping up with the street program, and the ones that fall outside of that. Recently, y'all approved the engineering for the 18-inch water main that is cast iron that crosses the railroad in 2 locations as well as the river, and so most all of that capital is dedicated to those projects.
So where's College Hills in this?
College Hills would be funded depending on if it bids out in whichever aspect. But we have also saved up fund balance to pull out of, to cash fund that entire project as well. So
We earlier talked about College Hills being done late fall, the utility work being late fall of 2021. Is that still what we're looking at?
Yes, ma'am, we're planning to, those documents are being finalized right now, the bid documents are being finalized right now, and so we plan to have that out for bid within hopefully the next 30 to 45 days. 30-day bid process, award of council, and then we will have probably 30 to 45 days to get all of the paperwork, everything signed, finalized, all the bonds in place and everything ready to go, so we should start construction hopefully mid to late fall, early winter.
that is the project.
Fortunate fall's like coming up pretty fast.
It is.
I mean, August
It's
1
running
is
up on us really
Monday,
quick.
so.
Yeah, time's flying, so we're trying to push really quick on this, but we were, they're just finalizing construction documents and trying to get everything ready to be put into the bid documents and get it out on the street, so.
So when we talk about the $8 million expenditure that we talked about for
Stormwater.
stormwater, so is that part of this project, on top of this project on College Hills? Are they connected in terms of work?
Correct, they are. All of this will be, the entire College Hills project, when we're talking about the utilities, we're talking about not only the water, but the wastewater as well. And then drainage from basically the loop up to the Arroyo, and then all of the reconstruction of the street as well. All of that, with the utility relocates and everything, will all be bid as one package.
Okay, does anyone have a question for Shane on College Hills? Because I know that keeps coming up on a regular basis, College Hills, College Hills, College Hills. So now's your chance to ask some questions about College Hills. I think we're good.
Okay.
We're all looking at no questions. College Hills, College Hills, College Hills.
I'm just ready for it.
Okay.
All right, we're going to
Thank you.
switch to the solid waste fund. The primary source for the solid waste fund is user fees, which are structured for the permitting of the landfill. And These costs are expected to be about $5.5 million. There's a slight increase in user fees, as you can see from the 57,000.
And that's based off of what?
Our annual trend, we keep trending up. We were kind of expecting things to kind of slow down and fall off, but they just haven't. So we keep trending up on volume. So we're, again, just anticipating an increase in volume.
So is this solid waste fund also a part of that Concho River water project? Are these tied together?
No, ma'am. Totally separate fund. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you'll see a slight decrease in other. That is due to interest income. That line also includes leases, contract services, and liquidated damages. Moving to expenditures, there is a slight increase in the distribution for the executive director, with very few changes other than the exception for professional services for the beginning phases of permitting the landfill site. And you'll see the offsetting decrease in capital. It was just moved up into a separate line item to contract that out.
And why is that? Because we don't do that, or we're not doing that on any of the other water funds?
This is the solid waste fund for the landfill. So as we're getting ready to permit, to work on the permit for the landfill, to increase our capacity out there, we, of course, have engaged a consultant or an engineering firm to help us work through that permitting process and work through some of the different things that we're looking at out there. And so as we're doing that, we're moving the money out of the capital account and moving it into our professional services account so we can, again, anticipating those costs as we move forward. When I brought that to council, when we awarded that to Biggs and Matthews Engineering, the 1.7 million cost, we're going to try to cash flow that as best we can out of this without having to dip into fund balance. Of course, as we get further into the process, we will have to utilize our fund balance to get through some of those bigger hurdles. But currently, right now, we're trying to cash flow everything basically through this fund. And that's why you see the movement within the fund.
Well, because it's unusual for us to see a decrease in capital expenditures. And so that raises a red flag going, well, this is not typical of what we do in this fund.
Yes, ma'am. It's an accounting function. We're required to pay for that out of a professional services and account.
Okay.
Is there any other questions on solid waste?
No, ma'am.
All right, transitioning to the stormwater fund, you'll see again a slight increase in user fees, and then a increase in the other line, which includes transfers for mowing of right-of-ways and interest income. The mowing of right-of-ways increased to $40,000 and decreased to $15,000.
Let me ask you a question, because we see this fees line. So we're not talking about, just to be clear for the public, we are not increasing the fee. It's that there's more use.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so the fee dollar goes up not because of an increase in fee and the actual cost of, or the fee cost. It's just the usage of the storm.
Yes, ma'am. The volume is increasing.
Uh-oh.
All right, moving to personnel, again, a slight increase there for the executive director, and then O&M increased for mowing of right-of-ways and special projects.
Well, this executive director keeps every single fund, so I don't know what they're getting. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He must be really nice. I think he's blushing at this moment, too.
Do we have any other questions on the stormwater fund?
Do I have questions from someone on stormwater? With none.
All right, that actually concludes our presentation of the Public Works funds, and we'll transition to Shane Kelton.
Okay, and the next one, we're going to, actually, when we start talking about fees, at the strategic planning meeting, if you remember, we did bring to you an item when we start looking at all of our infrastructure issues that we're trying to deal with from a streets perspective, drainage perspective, and basically all across the board. When we're starting, to deal with our infrastructure and trying to figure out how we can, one, increase our capacity in what we're doing and what we're taking on and trying to move this program along and move our street reconstruction rehabilitation project along and move it along faster. We brought to you a couple of ideas back in the strategic planning meeting. I'll get it out here in a second. And when we looked at this, some of the things that other cities are doing are creating fees, street use fees, drainage fees. Of course, there's all kinds of different fees that people have created over the years. But looking at this, we brought this to you and kind of showed you what some of the other cities around the state, kind of our size, are doing. As we kind of delve into this further, we start looking into the street fees. Things that we could look at as we're contemplating the street use fee is for pay-as-you-go capital. So one, if we do have a project that needs to be completed and we have those funds saved up, we can go ahead and pay for that as we go. And then also we can use it for operation and maintenance expenses as it's related to rehabilitation efforts. I've talked to previous councils in the past as we've looked at it for, expanding our mill and overlay program, things like that, to try to get, I think from looking at our situation, looking at our streets and kind of where we are within our program, a mill and overlay program would, I think, give us really a big bang for our bucks. And so as we look to that, those are things that we should really take a look at if we're interested in pursuing this.
So, just to be clear, on mill and overlay, we can only use that product and that process when the street's at a certain usable level, meaning the foundation of the street is in strong enough condition, I don't know which words to use, but so that you can do mill and overlay. So for the streets which have aged longer than they should, mill and overlay is not an option. So it's total reconstruction or another process. Correct.
And we do have streets, and unfortunately many streets throughout town that have the base structure has completely failed, and the mill and overlay would not be an option. But we have tons of those intermediate streets. The vast majority of them are intermediate streets to where a mill and overlay project where we do go in there, we remove the existing pavement, go in there, proof roll, do some spot repairs, and then pave back. The vast majority of our streets are still in condition to where that will happen. We have, College Hills, we have some of those that were, Bell Streets. We have several of those around town that have just completely failed. Portions of Chadbourn, this North Chadbourn project that we're going to have come up here pretty quick, that have just completely failed. Those will have to be reconstructed, but we have the vast majority of our streets can still be rehabilitated at a lower cost than a complete reconstruction.
So the $80 million program that we have out there, which what year we're through is year 5?
Correct.
Right?
We bonded through year 5.
So talk about the projects that are anticipated or have been a part of that $80 million debt that we will have.
Okay. And of course, we have the Bell Streets, we have Martin Luther King Boulevard, we've completed a small portion of Southwest, of course, actually all of Southwest, small portion of Southland. And those are the ones that are active and going on. Of course, College Hill's coming up really quick. North Chadbourn, all the way from 7th Street, all the way from there, US 67, basically, all the way up to 43rd, past the Coliseum. That's coming up really quick. We also have on the books, we have Sunset, we have Howard, we have Edmond, Glenna, Edmond, 29th. All of those kind of run in one street that all run in together, separate names, but all the way up to Chadbourn, all the way back to the Loop or 67 coming up. We have Rick's Drive is a part of that. Trying to name all of them off the top of my head, it's hard. But we have streets basically all over town. Unfortunately, though, that's just
Well, my point is 80 million only goes so far.
It
And so when
does.
you talk
It's very
about-
small, it's
yeah.
a small number of lane miles that we're actually
Yeah.
reconstructing.
And that's really my point, is the $80 million sounds like a lot, but when you take a look at, for example, Bell Street, which cost over $22 million, if you talk about MLK, which was $7 million, so you're talking about big chunks of dollars. So the 80 million doesn't go as far as you would like it to go. So once you get past those streets that are to be included in that $80 million debt, we have a lot of street repair work that still has to be done, which we can only do currently at a pay-as-you-go situation. So depending on how strong the economy is, if you will, the pay-as-you-go is our only option for continuing the work beyond that $80 million.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have visited with Tina in our debt capacity, when we get to the end of our 80 million, the capacity currently within our structure that we have right now, we're pretty much to the end of that for a while. So it's going to be a while before we could even start bonding more projects past that, without some significant changes in how, and Michael Kimberly could better explain how that works, but we're at the end of our capacity for a while. So we do need, an alternative funding arrangements to keep moving this along. And again, even though, depending on we're going to look at some numbers here in a minute and kind of get a feel from council where council may be comfortable looking at this fee and what y'all would be comfortable in generating. But again, monies are needed to keep this program moving along and keep us going. Otherwise, we're going to come to an abrupt halt at some point, and we're just going to go back to just purely maintenance efforts at that point.
I think everyone on council would say that the public has made it pretty strong statement about we need our streets fixed, that as a priority, we must take care of our streets. We hear it, we heard it a lot this past year. And so for me, we need to look at potential options for continuing the work on streets that need attention and aren't included in the $80 million program. If we're truly going to address the citizens' requests for continual improvement on street work. Yes, Tommy?
And I would assume within what you're going to talk about will then allow you folks to continue the maintenance on the work you are just completing and will complete on College Hills and so forth. Because when we get 5 years out, you're going to have to start doing something College Hills again.
Well, we're hoping 20 years.
Well,
but,
we hope.
Yeah.
But still,
The maintenance cycle always has to be there.
Will always, so that is included, at least in your thinking, with whatever you're going to talk about in terms of fee structure.
Correct. We're going to, yes, again, as we look forward in this and we're creating this program, or the continuation of this program, maintenance is always going to be a part of this. That's what, I hate to be this way, but that's what got us in this problem was lack of maintenance, and so we don't want to get back into that same trap.
Right,
So
right.
Tom, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Mayor, just remind everybody, in March, April, May, we all campaigned for those of us that ran on streets. It was the number one thing that was brought up the entire way, so we're not going to leave that behind. So shame pursue.
Okay. And, and we've looked around the state and looked at different funding strategies or structures out there that are out there that are out there, and everybody has kind of their own twist on things. And so, but two of them that really stood out. One is basically a fixed rate for residential and non-residential. When you look at this is very easy to apply. However, it's probably not, start looking at the commercial side of things, it's not equitable.
Would you hold 1 second, Shane? Harry wanted to make a comment a minute ago, and I didn't notice him raising his hand.
Thank you.
Magic.
Got to wait for the light to turn green. I just want to make sure that if we move to this particular program and we really know that anything we can do to help take care of the streets is something that probably 90% of the citizens want us to do. But this is not going to be a cure-all, and we're not going to be able to fix every street next year or the year after simply because we moved to this program. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Again, back when we did the Fugro study back in 2015, at that time, it was estimated if I wanted to fix everything overnight, I needed about $500 million. And of course, we're not going to raise $500 million off.
And you also wouldn't find the workforce to get the $500 million done either, so in
That's
either way, it
correct.
wasn't going to work.
That's right. Either way, we're not going to be able to do this overnight. But again, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So that's going to be our strategy moving forward, is to
I
take
just
some
want to make
small
sure we
bites.
got it out there ahead of time, even though we'll probably still get many phone calls later and said, hey, how come we didn't get this street fixed because of this? But anyway, got it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
And when we go from a fixed rate structure, looking, more probably at an equitable, especially when we start talking on the commercial side, would be a fixed rate for residential, and then a variable rate based on uses for non-residential. As we kind of look at some of the scenarios, looking at just a flat rate scenario, and these are approximate numbers. These are not hard numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but just based on looking at our billing, and basically some of these numbers are about 2 years old from our water billing numbers, but just pulling meters based off of our water bills. This is kind of what it would look like from a flat rate. To money generation is over here, how much money it would generate. This is how much for commercial. This would be how much for residential from a flat rate perspective. To raise $10.8 million, every household, residential household would be charged $14.60 per month, and every business would be charged $169.80 per month. And so you can kind of look as you go down the line there as to what that would look like from just a flat rate. If we kind of move into the next scenario where we're using a variable tier structure based on impacts, we would still look at doing a residential rate that is a fixed rate. This mimics Abilene. Abilene, when we look at all this, Abilene probably has the easiest methodology to follow as compared to some of the other cities that we've looked at. So we're mimicking this for y'all to look at and to kind of throw this out and get y'all's thoughts and opinions on. From a residential rate, $6.75 per month for a single family home. Apartments per dwelling unit would be $6 billed monthly. Abilene does have a low income and a senior citizens program at a reduced rate of $175. Public and private schools, primary schools would be $5 per student annually, and then college and universities would be $5 per student annually as well too, kind of going along that same kind of fixed unit cost there. As we kind of we start looking at doing the variable tier structure for commercial businesses out there. We start looking.
This seems to be so complicated.
Yes, but this is actually this is one of the least complicated ones out there.
Yeah.
And so and Abilene has broken this down into basically six categories is how they have it broke down into. There's other places have it broke down into different categories as well too. But basically what they've done is they'll take a business type, a land use category, whether that, you can see here, assisted living, automobile sales, hotels, restaurants, banks, things like that. And the Institute of Transportation Engineers has created a trip generation manual, and basically assigns each business type basically estimates how many times per day that cars travel to and from this business or these businesses, kind of based on their type. And this is a nationally published manual that people use across the United States. So it's nothing specific to Texas or our area. This is nationwide.
How do you determine the difference between a high turnover restaurant and a low turnover restaurant?
That's, again, there's, there's a lot that actually goes into it, and you can actually read how they define each one of them. And there's, how many categories?
There's a little over 400 categories.
Yeah, 400 different categories within this manual. And so instead of, and so when, and so Abilene and like many other cities did not want to have 400 different categories of businesses, so they kind of clumped them together. And so, but as we looked at those, this is kind of what the breakdown was, and the trip factor kind of based on the actual clientele and the actual business that they're in. And so,
I'm confused. So this is one, I thought the previous slide was the slide that Abilene used. Now we're saying.
it was on the residential side. This is what they
Okay.
use on the commercial side.
Okay, just to
Sorry,
be
yep.
clear.
This is what they use on the commercial side. Yeah, and this is, and again, this is just a sample of how, what Abilene has broken it down into. And so, and just to kind of move it along a little further, this is kind of how it broke down. We actually took some actual businesses that are here in San Angelo, and did a quick calculation just on Google Maps, just kind of looking at square footage and this, that, and the other, and kind of just broke it down really quick, just to kind of give council an idea of what this would look like based on Abilene's numbers.
Now, is that, for example, line one, $55, is that the monthly fee?
That would be the monthly fee associated based on the trip factor of these facilities. And so as you go through here, you can kind of look at the different businesses around town, and kind of get an idea of what their monthly fee would be based on, this is Abilene's numbers. This is how Abilene does it, not necessarily how we would do it. I mean, because we have this broken down from $55 to, or whatever it was, 25 to 75. You can go to College Station, and if you look at their numbers, well, I'm trying to give you the other side of the.
Mayor, if I could, while they're digging, you kind of opened this topic when you ask about the multiple categories, but understanding and administering this from a staff perspective gets very difficult when there are a bunch of categories. So I think, just so y'all know, coming down the road at you, these possibilities, from an administrative perspective, we'll be advocates for something that is simpler to administer and bill. Because you're right, it gets very complicated, and I would assume we would do this through the utility statement. That's already got multiple utilities on it with multiple rates in each utility. This would be adding that complexity to that. And so for us to accurately and effectively administer that bill, this is going to increase complexity. And so these simpler structures we would be advocates for.
So what you're saying, it's the mayor's fault for opening Pandora's box.
Well, and while this does look really complicated, these are not.
Exactly.
This is kind of on the backside,
Multiple categories.
but as we do, but and again, when we're looking at the 25 to 75 for Abilene's, kind of a range in what they're doing, you take, for example, College Station. When you look at their same type tier structure, they go from $1,820 a month to $263.80 a month, and so everybody has their own version of how they do this and where they place the burden, and so to speak. And so again, we're just basing this off Abilene's numbers right now because again, this was in our minds basically the least difficult one to try to work our way through. And then but that kind of gives you an idea of what Abilene's numbers look like on our businesses here. When we kind of take those same numbers and we look at what kind of money that would generate per year based on our approximate numbers within the city itself, we can look from the residential side of things. There's going to be a fixed rate. We're looking at about generating $3.25 million per year. From the commercial side of things, based on what we showed you a while ago, we would be generating approximately $1.4 million per year. looking at this, kind of that 4.6, 4.7 million per year would kind of be the amount that we would generate based on Abilene, using Abilene's numbers with their rate structures against our quantities.
Well, I know that originally Abilene put in this structure and this fee approach to fixing their streets. And I think they've been in it like 3 years now. Is that right about that? But they now are looking to do the same thing that we did early on, and that was to obligate debt to fix their streets, because even though that has been a good program for them for the maintenance aspect of Abilene, it has not allowed them to do what we've done, and that is reconstruct water, sewer, utility.
And taking care of their
total road.
worst, taking care of their worst roads, correct.
So they're approaching that, so it's just kind of the reverse of what we've done.
And Mayor, we, of course, on our end, we do a pay-as-you-go on the seal code and all the maintenance part of it. So what Abilene did was to kind of mimic that program, but again, we're doing it as pay-as-you-go. So we're barely looking at this scenario to really do everything else, though. So again, as others are trying to catch up, we're not trying to emulate and do what Abilene's doing. Actually, what they did right here was to cover or get to the level that we were just on the street maintenance and the pay-as-you-go.
Well, yes, because we are spending $3 to $4 million a year on maintenance work, and depending on the budget scenario, whether we get $3 million or $4 million a year.
Correct.
So this would, under the same scenario that we currently use, that would be saying if we implemented it, if we chose to do this, we would continue to have the $3 to $4 million existing in the budget for that maintenance plus additional revenue here.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
So we would be able to double the amount of work, if you will, on our streets if we applied and chose to do this.
Yes, and, keeping the existing dollars that we have now for our maintenance program, our chip seal program and the HA5 that's coming on and we're able to use on some of the streets, not all of our streets, but as we look at these maintenance functions to keep that $3 to $4 million that we've been spending, maintaining those type functions. Of course, the cost of that is rising with everything else as well too. But this would allow us to go beyond that and actually not only do just the maintenance portion of it, but also start really working on the rehabilitation portions of it, which I talked about earlier with the mill and overlay program, those type of things. I think everybody's seen with the emergency funding that y'all provided earlier for the road repairs coming out of the winter storm, the work that we've done on Jackson Street and some of those other streets that people have seen, and Howard Street, I know Councilman Carter over there had visited with me the other day about how nice that was and that program and how we could expand that program. And so those are the type of things that we're really think that we're going to be able to, this type of program would allow us to be able to do a lot more of that moving into the future and those type of functions that
Well,
I
I
think people would
noticed
really like.
where we've done the road repair from that storm, in these big 4-foot by 3-foot section things that you've done. The work and the quality has been phenomenal. Every one of those that I've gone by and seen, I've been very impressed with the quality of work, and without a doubt know that work is going to be there for a while. It's not something that was like a quick patch and then when the next rainstorm comes, it's going to create
Yes,
another
ma'am.
pothole.
It
So
was,
they're
yeah.
solid.
It was
Construction.
those areas were milled out and actually, inlaid with a hot mix, with a hot mix machine. So yes, that probably, it's not like the cold lay product where we just throw and go trying to fill a pothole and get on down the road to the next pothole.
Yeah,
These
I
were
think-
actually cut and repaired correctly. Yes, ma'am.
Great. Tommy, I think you look like you have a question.
Shane, if we backed into this, how much money do you need? Now, that's a stupid question. I got that. Everybody's sitting there looking at me and saying, that's the stupidest question. Okay, I'll go ahead and give everybody that. It's a stupid question. But how much money do you need? If we're going to back into this, do you need 4.7? Do you need 8.2? Do you need 1.3? How much do you need?
As we're looking at moving through this program, and it depends on which way we approach this. If we approach it from a strictly just a contracting standpoint, You know,
If you go back to our food growth study and the list of streets that are on our food growth study, if we had about 9.2 to 10 million a year, that would let us work through the prioritized streets on the food growth study. Obviously, that's just a select 25 areas, but that's the quantifiable numbers that we had back in 2015. Obviously, we've had escalation and inflation on those numbers, but around that 9.2 to 10 million dollar annually would get us moving in the right direction very quickly on some of those areas.
So to read into what you just said, what we're discussing here would be a pay-as-you-go situation, much like we have now with the 3-4 million. That's just what y'all are able to do each year in different districts. So this would be very similar, just pay as you go.
It's a pay as you go, and basically it's taking that rehabilitation approach to it, and, you know, from that aspect of it. Now, you know, again, when we start looking at, you know, contracted costs versus in-house, maybe an in-house crew cost, and, you know, we've run some of those numbers as well too, and we believe if we could build up to that point that doing it in-house, we could definitely save quite a few dollars doing that by doing it in-house. Again, that's a planned approach over time, not we implement and we're working tomorrow. It's not that fast, and so as we move along, so I think there's definitely we need a plan in place to build up into where we want to go, where our end goal is, and build up into it.
I think we have to be very aware that, again, we're talking about a fee, and I'm concerned that we have to find a good balance between what we're asking the citizens of San Angelo to take out of their pocket to put towards this versus what they can afford versus what the dollar amount is that we need. We've got to find that balance between it because, as you know, many people complain regularly about property tax dollars, and even though we've maintained the same rate of property tax dollars for 10-plus years, the appraisal district continues to increase valuations, which means more money's coming out of the citizens' pocket when they pay the property taxes, et cetera. So for me, it's about finding the balance between the want, the need, and what's affordable without putting citizens in a very tight financial position, because if your family income is not expected to grow, then your ability to continually take more out to pay for things like this is impacted. So I think we have to be reasonable in terms of the approach. And as much as I'd like to say, what do we need and how do we go get it based off of a program, it's unrealistic in terms of what we're asking our citizens to do unless we're willing to address the issue of property tax rate and reducing the property tax rate a small amount to allow for a fee structure to help pay for the streets. So I think we have to be looking at the big picture in terms of what might be reasonable.
Yeah. And Mayor, with that said, if council is interested in pursuing this and moving forward, might I suggest, as we look at fee structures as a whole from the Public Works Department, you know, earlier we were talking about water rates and sewer rates, and, you know, when we addressed, you know, when we were talking about the stormwater fee a while ago as well, when we start looking at all of the fees that could be associated within the public works area, and we start talking about drainage and trying to find money to deal with drainage and those type things. You know, what I would propose would be to let us bring on a consultant that could work with us, not only one, to establish the street use fee and how we would iron that out within us, and again, two, with y'all's feedback, kind of seeing how y'all want this distributed amongst whether that's residential versus commercial and all of those type things, to see where that how y'all want that burden to lie and to where within that. But also, let's step back and take a bigger look at all of this, because, you know, I know that, one, our stormwater fee has not been increased, you know, that we established back in 2010, has not seen a single increase in 11 years, and of course, inflation has beat us up within that fund as well, too. But as we move forward, you know, we're looking at 2 years, we're having to renew our permit in 2 years. We were lucky in our last cycle that, you know, the census hadn't come out yet, and we haven't topped that 100,000 mark. I feel pretty certain as we're moving into this 2020 census that we're going to top that $100,000 mark, and our tier structure within the government is going to change how they look at us in addressing our stormwater issues in our MS4 permit area, and dealing with those clean water issues. And I think too, we're going to have to see an increase in that side as well too within the next couple of years. We know water rates and sewer rates aren't going to be able to stay where they are forever either, and so maybe let's take a more comprehensive look at all of this. Have a consultant come on and let's take a comprehensive look at all of the fees within the public works area, and create a strategic plan that over time implements these fees over time. You know, and kind of even out that curve instead of taking these big, huge leaps, you know, from time to time. Let's try to even this curve out just a little bit and take a very strategic approach, you know, taking steps at a time instead of leaps at a time. When we either implement fees, looking at implementing fees and or raising fees to accommodate things that we know are coming up in the future, that these needs are going to be coming up in the future. Let's take a more strategic and applied approach to looking at these fees moving forward. I don't know if that is something that would suit council or not, but again, that would be my suggestion, to maybe take a big picture look at all of them and figure out how we can move this along in small bites, not big bites. Or
My
big chunks.
perspective is the following is that the citizens have said very aggressively, get the streets fixed. That's what they've said, get the streets fixed. Those other issues probably exist, and not to diminish that conversation, but people haven't said to us, please increase my stormwater fee. They haven't said that, and they hate that stormwater fee.
And they're not going to.
And they're not going to. They hate that stormwater fee more than they hate anything else.
I understand.
They hate that fee. So I'm not interested today in talking about hiring a consultant to look at all those issues and waiting for them to come up with some game plan in totality. What I am looking for is a way to address the street issues. And we need to take that as a single subject and talk about it, figure out how we do it in a bigger way than what we're currently doing it. Those other issues, perhaps next year we can do that, whatever, but we can't keep we can't keep adding on to the customer's debt to the city, if you will, in terms of the number of fees that we keep asking them to pay. I mean, we've got to be sensitive to people who are retired. You know, we very often talk about fixed income on retirees, but if you're getting paid $30,000 a year, that's a fixed income.
Yes, ma'am.
Whether you're retired or not, that's fixed. And so if we keep adding expenses to that, the average family has to make cuts somewhere in their life, just as the city has to make cuts in terms of what we can afford and not afford. So I really feel that we need to look at the street situation as a top priority right now, and those other issues can be dealt with down the road. But right now, I just think we need to figure out how to get some funds to be more aggressive about street repairs, Tom.
Shane, I've got a question here. So can you go back to the businesses that you listed, that one sheet? And you had all of them stated on it. So how about somebody that has a lot of frequency but not walk-in, say Suddenlink? All right, if you took all the people that use Suddenlink, all right, where would they fall on this list?
It would be based on basically their square.
Should be the maximum.
I mean, it's going to be based on their square footage and based on within the trip generation guide that is established, there is a service frequency for that type of establishment, and we would base that frequency based on, I guess, the square footage of their business based on that frequency, would come up with, and it would
So
fall
it'll still
within
go
one of these
back more to
codes.
square footage than it will.
Yes, and the trip generation code. There is a code listed for that type of establishment or business.
So what, Tom, what Abilene did is they took that manual of over 400 different business types of business units, and they pared that down to the most frequent businesses found in Abilene. So they have 62 trip generation codes that then they assigned all the businesses in Abilene underneath one of those categories of the 62, which generated it. So it would be looking through that list, finding out what businesses are most popular in San Angelo, what would be most applicable, and then assigning that particular code or that particular classification to that business for the billing structure. Obviously, that's labor intensive, and that's taking a specific look at every business in San Angelo. So there's a lot of work that's involved with that. Much less than some of those cities that we looked at as far as how they're calculated, but short of the flat rate structure, which is by far the simplest to implement, this is the most equitable and the most simplistic that works within our current billing structure and our billing what we have available to us in our utility bill to make that happen. Now, again, it's taking a comprehensive look at all of those codes and finding out which codes are
Yeah,
most
Pat,
applicable for us.
I think what you've probably got the fairest, most equitable program across right here. What I was worried about, there are businesses that are high frequency, but they don't actually have a trip or the square footage, all right? And if I was gonna draw a dot on anybody, I have no problem drawing a dot on Suddenly, all right? And don't mean that bad, but I'm saying to have the market share that they have here and the small square footage, they could carry their fair share. So I'm good.
And that's 100% the type of direction that we would need, when we bring this back for an overall approval, an overall look that we would need from council and management.
Thank you, Patrick.
Do you have further questions or comments for Shane or any further questions? Keep going then.
Okay, and I guess really just, I'm looking for direction at this point from council. Are y'all comfortable with this type of scenario for us to start approaching this type of scenario? And again, I would ask, even if we're not going to do a comprehensive look at the entire city though, I still believe that we need a consultant on board to help us work through all of this. We just flat do not have the staff to take care of, to look at all of the different businesses in town and count the number of, because when you start getting into it and you start looking at all of the different Stripe stores, how many fueling stations do they have? All of that plays into the trip generation factor, and how you calculate all this stuff. And it's just too overwhelming for our local staff to be able to handle.
I think the question to that is, Shane, timeframe, because we're talking about the 2022 budget. This is August, basically. We're looking to try to come up with a plan, and when you start saying, okay, we need to hire a consultant, by the time we go through the process of doing an RFP, hiring somebody, letting them do the work, you're probably looking at 2022, 2023 in terms of implementation.
I believe we could bring something back quite a bit quicker than that. And we will have to look. We have some existing contract with engineering firms that do a lot of this type of work already. And we may be able to tie that in with an existing contract that we already have to be able to bring somebody on board to help us with this. We still need to work through the purchasing side of that to make sure that our IDIQ, actually, when we sent that out, covers this. But we believe that we can get on this fairly quick. If this is something council is really interested in, we believe we can get on this really quick. And if this is the type of, if y'all are basically good with these general parameters that we've brought to you today to kind of mimic or basically work with, then I think we can push this through fairly quick, Mayor.
What I think we want to do is use someone who's had a program that's been successful. From in talking to the mayor of Abilene, he feels very strongly that this program has been successful in terms of support by the citizens and the ability to execute it correctly. what I want the citizens to know is that we're looking at an opportunity, a strategy to move up quicker, faster, our ability to address the street issues. And as much as none of us want to talk about new fees, we also know that many people don't like it when the city continues to borrow money, and you can only borrow X amount of money based off of your financial situation. So we do have to find a way to address the citizens' needs, issues, and it's called streets. So I think from what I'm seeing from all of our city council members is that they'd like you to move forward on this, come back to us for a more finalized plan that we could adopt and implement in a 2021, 2022 budget cycle.
And I guess as we're going along, are these the type of associated fee, is this fee structure associated, are y'all comfortable with this type of fee structure? I mean, as far as from I guess from the overall looking at the monthly costs associated with our commercial businesses and the monthly costs associated with our
Well, I think that when I look at it, I think the most realistic number for us to talk about is coming up with a fee structure that would produce 5 million, around the $5 million mark. I think anything larger than that is not reasonable and would, even though citizens want us to get the street work done, I think anything more than that is going to be I think it's going to be very concerning to people. Tom?
One final one here. So I was just chatting here with Hebert. Would this be anybody with a water bill? I mean, could this expand out to the ETJ? I mean, where do you stop this?
We can't expand it into, I don't believe we can expand it into the ETJ, because this would be an ordinance, and I don't think that there's any way that this would expand out past our actual city limits, and so it would be.
Not with that attitude. Come on now, Shane.
It's not me. There's a lady on the other side of the table over there shaking her head.
It's your time. Well, I mean, so, yeah, I can't tell you how many people call me and complain about the streets and they don't live in the city limits. I went, well, just move in the city limits and give me an extra $3,500 to go down there. But if not that, understand that people inside the city limits are bearing 100% of the burden. That part of sales tax we get, that little percentage there is nothing huge. So it was looking at a way to try to make this, to take you from 4.6 to 6.3. All right, and if it's going on a water bill and it's going out there, to me, there's a way, but the attorney.
But if you're in the ETJ and you have San Angelo water, then if this is based off of a water meter and how is it that if you buy water from San Angelo, that you couldn't use that? I mean, describe the legal issue there that would prohibit it.
The legal issue is the jurisdiction the city has, and we don't have jurisdiction to require anybody to do anything by ordinance outside of the city limits versus the utility, which is essentially selling a commodity to people. So we're selling them something and they're paying us for what they use, rather than saying, here's our code of ordinances, you have to obey these. We just don't have the jurisdiction to do
But
it.
why does this have to be an ordinance?
That's the only way that we can impose fees is through an ordinance. We can't force people in the ETJ to do anything any other way than through some statute. We could get a statute passed at the state level, perhaps.
So if I live in the city and I buy water from the city, I buy water from the city by nature of an ordinance?
The fee is set by nature of an ordinance. You buy water from the city by a contract you sign when you go to the water department and say, I want to be a water customer. So it's no different than anything that is bought and sold. And that water bill is actually just the mechanism by which we collect payment. It's not that we're selling something when we're selling this fee.
Tommy?
It seems to me that unless an individual has no means of transportation, and that would be city transportation, not city anymore, but Concho Valley Transit, if they are using our streets in whatever vehicle they use, then that puts wear and tear on our streets. They may not own a car, but in fact, they are using our streets. So you asked a question a minute ago, which for my one part, I would like to see this as fair and equitable as possible, but those that use our streets more, and I'm not picking on those that ride transit, no, but if it's Suddenlink, if it's whoever it might be, but if they generate traffic on our streets that puts wear and tear on our streets, it's a user fee. So that's in my way of thinking, that is the approach I would like to see, to the extent you all can do that. And I agree with the mayor, 5 million. If you can generate that, let's see, what good you guys can do with that. Get to that number, however that is best and most equitably distributed. That's just my one piece of input.
Do I have input from anybody else at this point? Harry?
Tommy, just to follow up on that, I don't want to make this program so difficult to manage from the staff's perspective that it takes more of the staff time to do that than they should be doing something else. So I like the way this is set up. And quite honestly, there are people I know in a city that probably do not use the city streets, but let's keep it simple. Let's figure out a way to do it, and I like this approach.
Mayor, could I
Yes.
ask, one of the things that the council has made clear is to expedite, move this along, don't sit on it. I really haven't figured out exactly the question I need to ask, but as Kimberly and the budget folks work through finalizing that budget, it sounds to me like we're going to be collecting and expending in the next fiscal year. Would you be ready to include some revenue amount in the budget, or would you rather, when the final billing structure is put together, bring back a budget amendment ordinance at that time?
I think we need a time frame on this. You can let things go for months on end. You got to have a deadline. And the deadline is we need this in the 2022, 2021, 22 budget. So worst case scenario, it should be in the second half of the budget year, but best case scenario it would be in the second quarter. Worst case scenario in second quarter of the budget year.
You good?
Worst case,
Thank you.
because the streets age every day.
Yes, ma'am, I am aware of that. We will bring this back as soon as we can get it done.
Keep it simple.
We will do it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, that concludes Shane's proposals and information for us today. So we'll move on to 3A3, which is other items needing council direction. Is there anything at this point relative to the budget process? With none, we will ask for an adjournment. And a second by Lucy. All in favor, say aye. This budget meeting is adjourned.